Hi everyone, welcome to another midweek video or podcast wherever you are checking us out from. It is Tuesday, June 16, and last week Tuesday we talked a little bit about what faith is like and kind of just scratched the surface of that topic. And today I want to move one step deeper into what does growing in faith look like and what does that mean? And not thinking of faith specifically as what we know, but growing in faith in terms of growing in character, specifically Christian character. Now, if you didn't check out last week, that's fine. Just to review a little bit, I said faith is first and foremost a gift, and then we use and develop that gift. And I use the example of balance and riding a bike. We don't achieve a sense of balance. We're born with a sense of balance. That's God-given, but we use that to learn how to ride a bike. By the same token, think of a gymnast. The amount of balance it takes to do a balance beam routine, most of us could not do that. But a gymnast can go from just having a sense of balance to being able to achieve a balance beam routine. Most of us can't do it, but how does a gymnast do it? Here's how they do it, very simply. They do it with a lot of discipline and a lot of practice. So in faith, how do we go from having this gift of faith that, like I said, is God-given, starts with God's grace? How do we go from having faith to being the faith equivalent of a gymnast who can do that balance beam routine, if we can kind of use that as a metaphor? And it's the same path. It takes discipline and it takes practice. Now, there's something that I want to say about spiritual disciplines or spiritual practices, and that is that they can be broadly divided into two categories. Now, they can be divided much more finely than that, but the two categories I want us to think about today, just as a starting point, are practices of engagement or practices of doing something and practices of denial, practices of not doing something. So there's a Bible verse that can help us think about this. It's in Psalm 34. It says, avoid evil and do good, or turn from evil and do what is right. So you see there's a denial of something and there's an engagement of something, staying away from evil and doing what is right. This is so simple. Now, one thing I want to say about spiritual practices of denial is they're not always about avoiding something that's evil. It can be something like fasting. Eating is not bad, but fasting is a spiritual discipline of denial that you go through for a little while to fix your heart, your mind on God. A similar spiritual practice of denial would be solitude, spending time alone to kind of clean out some of the distractions in your life and some of the noise in your life and just focus your heart and mind on God. So solitude, silence, these are spiritual practices of denial. And on the flip side, like I say, there are spiritual practices of engagement, of doing. Some examples would be study, prayer, Bible reading, but also there's a whole category of engagement of other people. So service, helping, things like that, even worship, celebration. These are spiritual practices of engagement. And so these are the tools, these are the ways that we go from, okay, I have a sense of faith that God gave me. I have, the Spirit has, as we said last week, the Spirit has kindled in my heart a true faith. But how do I move forward in that? Some spiritual practices, some spiritual disciplines. I'll take a few examples from Ephesians chapter 4. If you have time to read the chapter Ephesians 4 sometime today or later this week, check it out. But Paul, the author, does this kind of a back and forth between don't do this, but do this instead. So for example, he says, anyone who has been stealing must steal no longer, but must use their hands to do some good in order to help those who are in need. So there's denial and there's engagement. Paul also says in Ephesians chapter 4, keep your mouth from any unwholesome talk. It says elsewhere in the Bible, keep your tongue from evil and your lips from telling lies. So there's things that you shouldn't say, But then also in Ephesians chapter 4, Paul says, but speak the truth in love. So there's a holding back, there's a denial, and there's an engagement. Now, like I said, we don't only deny things that are evil, we should deny those out of hand, but there's a time and place for denying something that even on its own isn't wicked, isn't evil, just to focus our attention, to focus ourselves on God in a particular way for a period of time. Now, one point I want to make about this whole topic of spiritual practices is there is an element that is personal and specific. There's an element that's not. We should all be participating in scripture and prayer and some degree of service and things like this. But as far as what counts as a spiritual practice of denial is specific to one person or another. So for example, I have never been somebody who's gotten into video games. I didn't really get into them growing up. I never had a gaming console. So just as an example, it wouldn't really count for me to say that as a spiritual discipline, I'm avoiding playing games for a week or for 2 weeks, or that I'm limiting the amount of time. So instead of like 4 hours a day, I'm moving down to 45 minutes or fewer. That wouldn't really count in my life because that doesn't actually hold any traction in my life. So there is also an element of spiritual disciplines that's specific to your life and to my life. It's very personal. And that's what I want to challenge you on today, is to take an inventory of your life. And I want to challenge you to think, what could be one spiritual discipline of denial and one spiritual discipline of engagement that you could incorporate or add to your life? If you don't currently have a spiritual discipline of reading scripture every day, that would be a place to start. But if you're there, maybe consider where you can serve somebody else, how you can reach out and engage other people in other ways. And if there's something in your life that you think, I'm spending too much time on this is a distraction, maybe think, could I limit the amount of time? Could I do without that for a period of time as a spiritual discipline? So just kind of get the wheels moving in your mind. One spiritual discipline of engagement and one spiritual discipline of denial, and try that out for a week, 2 weeks, a month. These are ways, these are stepping stones that we can move from having a sense of balance to being a gymnast. And what I want to say is it is a lifelong journey. None of us becomes a spiritual expert, if there even is such a category for us humans, overnight or in a month or in a year. It's something that we keep growing. There's always development. There's always further to go. So think about these things, challenge yourself, and like I say, Ephesians 4, check it out to get this sense of denial, engagement, denial, engagement. I hope you have a great week, and we will see you again soon.